So let's get to your third question.
Yeah. So along those lines, I'm juggling Instagram, podcasts, email, social, like a lot of people that are solopreneurs. And specifically email is something I'd like to dial in more on this year. And I'm curious as to like how you set up a system where, I know there are things, Hype Fury that can send things to other things, but if there's like a mindset or a system that you use where you like for the week, I see your emails, they're very tight, they're coming out, you're writing all those in advance and then just scheduling them. Because I think that feeling of content overwhelm, especially when you get in the social rabbit hole, which you get the dopamine, the feedback from, it can start to make your head spin. And you're like, is this really where I'm spending the best use of my time?
A few suggestions, and everyone's different, right? Like you're using Instagram. I don't do anything on Instagram, really. I think it doesn't sound like this is a problem you have, but a lot of people are like trying to be on every platform, which is a huge mistake. Like just concentrate on one or two platforms. Yes, people always go, oh, but there's opportunities. Well, are you saying there's not enough? There's more than enough people on just Instagram for you to build a massively successful business. So you will grow faster if you focus on one channel. So that's the first thing. Don't spread yourself out too thin. When I started out kind of doing this like full time or whatever 6 years ago, I decided I was going to write a newsletter, publish a newsletter once a week, and write a blog post once a week. On social, I tried to post at least once a day. It was a little those two were like, okay, that's going to happen. Twitter, eventually I got to a place where I was like, okay, I'm going to post at least 3 tweets a day. But those tweets were a lot of repurposed content from the blog, from the newsletter. Take a sentence here, a sentence there, tweets that had worked that I would repurpose. So the first key is don't get into this trap where you need to like reinvent the wheel and be constantly creating new content all the time. Repurpose the stuff that you've used. Any post you make that works, post it again 3 months from now. People have different levels of sort of organizational commitment. I'm not a super organized guy, and I do have someone helping me with it now, although originally I didn't. But when something works, just whatever system works for you, put it in a spreadsheet. If you want, just schedule it for 3 months from now or whatever you want to do. But you're like, okay, I'm going to reuse that. I'm going to reuse that every 3 months. So you're building over time this library of content. And I think that's one of the things that to me is that I'm always talking about is you don't want to be doing random acts of content. You want to be strategic and building a library of content. The other piece of that is, again, being strategic about it is you can sit down and write a list of 20, 30, 40, 50 questions that your audience typically has, things they're interested in. Questions is a good format as opposed to just, a general topic. And your answers to those questions, whatever they be, whether they be entertaining or funny or serious or whatever it is, every one of those is a piece of content, right? And that it's going to be quote unquote valuable because it's going to be on topic. So that's what I say when I mean being strategic about content. That compared to the person that's, oh God, I need to post something on Instagram. What am I going to post? That becomes overwhelming. You could take a day or an afternoon and sit down and write all the questions and come up with answers or whatever you want over time and just go, okay, I'm going to do that. If I was starting over and was pressed for time, that's kind of how I did my blog posts initially. I was just doing it weekly. But if I was pressed for time, I could be like, you know what? I'm going to answer one question a day. Doesn't mean someone has to ask me the question, but I made a list of things that I know people want to know. And I'm going to do one of those a day. That shouldn't be that overwhelming. And yes, you can schedule them. There's a million scheduling tools. That certainly makes it easier. And I would recommend doing that. The other thing that I would say about that is amping up your newsletter can also help with this because again, the repurposing of content. Your newsletter literally could be as simple as here's the stuff I posted on Instagram this week. Because most people then see it. And this gets back to the algorithms. It gets back to sort of everything else. So a newsletter is really just a delivery mechanism. So people, I think also, you see with my newsletter, my weekday newsletter is like a sentence, right? That's not hard to write. I sit down and once a week in probably about half an hour or so, write 5 days worth of newsletters because they're each a sentence and a link. Now, finding that stuff, I know I have that newsletter. So whenever I see something that's interesting, I literally just save the link. And then when it's time, I don't spend time looking for stuff. I just, okay, pull this and, and that's a line. And because I have other stuff, because I have this podcast coming out, I know every Thursday my newsletter is going to be a link to the podcast. So now I only have to come up with 4 things a week. I cut back on blogging a little bit, but before when I was blogging every week, I'm doing a podcast and I'm doing a blog. That's 2 of my 5 daily newsletters automatically done. And you don't, by the way, you don't have to do a daily newsletter. Weekly is fine. So that combination of being strategic about the content creation part, repurposing stuff and reusing it so you're not constantly having to create new stuff, that can go a long way. The other thing I would say to you, and this is a little off topic, but I think it's really important from a content standpoint, and this also ties into the business stuff we were talking about before, thinking through, is your audience people going through a divorce or people who have already been divorced? And I know those are related, and I don't think you necessarily have to pick one, but they're really different. Well, let me ask you, your audience right now, what percentage do you think are going through a divorce and what percentage do you think are already divorced?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I kind of segment it where it's almost a third, where the actual audience that I just experimented with is I'm thinking about getting a divorce, because there's a lot of content about that. And actually, as a business or a lawyer, that's a lot more valuable of a customer than me who's already been through divorce. So it's another angle. But yeah, it's probably 20% thinking about divorce, 40% going through divorce, 40% figuring out life after divorce.
Okay, so here's what's interesting about that. If they're going through a divorce, I'm assuming they already haven't. I'm just using attorneys as an example, but
right.
I assume they already have attorney if they're going through it, probably.
They might want to change, but yes, they have one currently.
Okay. So, and if it's after divorce, they're not looking for an attorney, I assume, probably.
Right. Usually.
Right? So if I'm an attorney, 60% of your audience is not relevant to me. 80% actually, I think.
Right.
So 80% is not going to buy my thing. But now this is again where I kick into, and I'm sort of jumping back to the product thing, but I think it's really important. This is where I kick into, if I'm you, I start going, okay, well, what if I could somehow identify and package up only the people that are thinking about a divorce and sell that? I know what I could do. I could come up with some sort of automated email guide, 1-week newsletter thing, something that's all about trying to make the decision of whether or not you're going to get divorced. And I'm going to sell that automated email sequence to a sponsor. And now they know every single person that signs up for that is their prime candidate of thinking about whether or not they should get a divorce. And that could be an evergreen thing that you set up once. You have a sign up page. It's an automated thing. And you could sell that sponsorship and you get it for a month or a year or however you want to send it, however you want to do it. If you want, maybe it has 5 emails and you could sell 5 different sponsorships. You could do it however you want to do it. If you don't want to necessarily narrow the quote unquote audience, you want to find ways to surface the parts of the audience that are going to be most valuable to people. I'll give you another example. Then I'd come up with something else for post-divorce and think about who wants to reach post-divorce people. Maybe there's some company that really wants to reach divorced dads to get them back out dating or whatever it is. So maybe you create another separate little mini free to your audience, 5-day email sequence about how to go on your first date after divorce. And you go to the dating app or you go to whoever wants to reach them. And now your model has shifted from this broad general awareness play to I'm going to get you exactly who you guys want. And you'll be the sole sponsor, depending how you do it. You'll be the sole sponsor and you're going to be able to see how many people sign up for this, all that stuff. And it could even be a back end for you to get them on your main newsletter. So it becomes like a lead magnet for you that you're monetizing. All the work is sort of upfront as a product because then it just lives on outside of maybe switching up sponsors or whatever. And you start to see what your audience really is interested in, which then allows you to sell other products, other services, that kind of thing. So that's an example of how the strategic approach, the content blended with sort of the business side of it, blended with how do I give sort of these businesses exactly what they really want, not just the sort of general thing in a much more powerful way.
Yeah.
So I know we kind of took a left turn there, but I feel like it sort of ties a lot of the strings together.
Yeah, it's very good for sure. Are you intentional about the fact that I know on your sponsors, you're selling like one little plot of land as opposed to a monthly, 3 months indefinitely? Is that like kind of tie into, you want to use the real estate?
I mean, that's how I've chosen to do it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's better or worse. It's just sort of how it's worked for me. I do think having scarcity creates urgency. And so, like, for example, the ads in my weekday newsletters get way more clicks than the ones in my Sunday. When you buy an ad, you get my Sunday and the weekday. But the weekday, they're the only advertiser. And on Sunday, they're one of a bunch of stuff. But even on Sunday, I only sell 5 slots. So I would absolutely recommend limiting. That's, I think, the other problem with the directory a little bit. Is that the problems I see with the directory is, one, it's just infinite, which can be a strength depending on sort of how it goes. But the other thing is, I would imagine most, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I would imagine most people want a divorce attorney in their town.
Of course, yeah.
So a lot of it, because your audience is national, that's tricky. They're paying, a lot of those people aren't going to be relevant to them. But I also think that's where you can experiment and narrowing down, right? So for example, let's say we'll use like the divorce attorney one. You could pick a big city. You could pick like a New York, and maybe you tailor, I know I'm sort of all over the place, but it's coming to me as we talk.
Go.
I would do a guide on like how to decide and figure out if you're going to get a divorce, what to think about. And I'd get people to sign up for it, and I'd sell it to some sponsor, whatever. Then assuming that worked okay, I would do a spin-off. It's like the guide to getting divorced in New York, and you'll have fewer people interested in it. But your sponsor, your customer, is going to go, you can get me 50 people that are thinking about getting divorced in New York. And if that worked, you could do it for LA, for San Francisco. You're just, and the New York one, because people in New York probably have additional considerations that people in Omaha don't have. Right. So I think there's ways that you can tailor that. And you know what you might want to look at? This is sort of a weird example, but I think it's very true. If you look at the Hollywood, my wife used to sell advertising for Variety. And if you look at the Hollywood trade papers, they would always have these special issues in Powerless, right? So they used to have I forget what it was called, but, top business managers and lawyers. Now, why do they do that? Yeah, it's sort of interesting content, but they really did it because all those business manager and law firms wanted to run ads in it. So if you think about that and you go, I'm going to create content that if this existed, this company would be a no-brainer for them to buy because they want to reach the people that are going to read that thing. If you had something that was going to get, again, even as little as 50 people in New York thinking about getting divorced. That's where, and imagine you had that, and then you said, and I'm only going to let one New York divorce attorney sponsor it. And I'm going to let them be the expert who writes one of the emails or what, like that starts to become really valuable. And, because it's narrowed and spot on. You don't want to be doing the sort of commodity broad stuff.
Yeah, that is one issue I'm having is like, of course, I want to be the only attorney on your thing. So maybe I can't scale by volume, but I could maybe raise the price or create more different.
Yeah, and it can be the only one for set amounts of time, right? You could be like, look, you can be the only one for 3 months or, or whatever it is. You pay more, you can be the only one for longer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think, and again, or you can also go the other way and go, you know what? I want to focus on people that aren't local. Right now, you have this blend of local advertisers and national advertisers. Like it can work any of a million different ways. But I think that's the stuff that I would be thinking through.
Yeah, that's cool. Right. Even like the feature of the week could be like, you're the only divorce coach that we're going to feature for this week. So you're more likely to want to spend the money than being just thrown into a pile with a bunch of others because you'll know they're talking about me and Sunday it's over, but you feel like you received something.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.